Well, hi, Maria.
Hey Audrey, how are you doing today?
We're going to go ahead and just upload this afterwards because I had so many technical difficulties that I could not figure out how to get us to stream live. So, Maria, I am so excited to have you here because I know that you have been such a source of encouragement for me over the years, and I know that other parents will enjoy hearing just your words of wisdom during this crazy time of isolation and sheltering and whatever else we want to call it. My new favorite name, by the way, is ISO for the Rona, which is what they say in Australia.
I like that because it was funny. I was talking to a group of friends about this the other day, and I I really don't like the word quarantine.
Well, in
Um,
that really, technically, that's for when you're sick.
right. So I don't like that word at all. And I really don't like the phrase safer at home because I feel like it sends a message that every place else is not safe. And I understand the rationale behind the phrase, but I just, being people who encourage folks to spend time in the outdoors and away from home, safer at home makes it sound like everything we do is,
See, I
is
haven't even heard
okay.
safer at home. I've heard shelter at home.
Oh no, safer at
On
home
it.
is a big,
Oh, because like you're safer at home right now because of the thing.
right.
Sorry, I'm upping this so that it might more. This is we're just doing all kinds of good, and now I've stepped on my cord. All right. Okay, so Maria, let's go ahead and get started. I would
Okay.
love for first of all, tell people where you're from and what you do.
Right. So my husband, Tom, and I are the owners and directors of Catalina Island Camps, which is a traditional resident camp for boys and girls on the west end of Catalina Island. We're not on Catalina right now. We're at home in Altadena. All of our full-time staff are working remotely, doing what we can to be of service to our camp families who are also all at home. And while that's been a very different way of engaging with people, it's actually been kind of fun to be creative and think of new ways to connect with folks across the interwebs.
Isn't it crazy how, normally people wouldn't have time to hang out with us during March or April, you know what I mean? Like it's suddenly like for camps all across the country are doing a lot to help with the connection piece, which is what we're all best at.
Right. And I think one of the things that's been really interesting is that I've gotten really great feedback from our camp families about the things that we're doing. Um, And funny enough, those times of connection have been as meaningful and important to me as I think they are for the families that we're trying to serve. We have a game that we play every day at camp. Every morning, my husband Tom is on the PA. It's how he wakes people up. It's a trivia game, and kids are invited to the porch of our house to play this game. And so we've been doing that 3 times a week via Zoom. And it still gets me every single time when he does his Good Morning Catalina Island Camps thing that sounds like that Good Morning Vietnam thing that Robin Williams used to do. The looks on kids' faces of hearing sort of those familiar words, that familiar cadence, the joy on their faces is just, whenever I'm having a bad day, I just think about, there's just one boy in particular that he's been on almost every single, we call it snooze you lose, almost every single snooze you lose Zoom call, but still every single time, as soon as Tom starts talking, like his face lights up and it just, yeah, it
That's so
makes
sweet.
me very
Well,
happy. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think people need something other than like bad news right now, and I think that it's been a nice relief for campers and for camp staff to be able to connect with each other during this time. And I hope that one of the outcomes of this is that people realize just the important role that camps play in people's lives and how we do specialize in the connecting thing.
Right.
And so I love all that you're doing. So now, first of all, why don't you share who you're sheltering with, or where are you, and what's happening right now with you?
So we're at home in Altadena, and it's just Tom and I. Our son is in Atlanta right now, sheltering there. And so the big thing for us, obviously, we're all working from home, so we're doing a ton. I spent a lot of time on Zoom. I spent a lot of time on Zoom. I've learned way more about it in the last 3 weeks than I ever thought I would. But then I have also taken up baking sourdough bread, of all things. I had this starter that I purchased at a camp auction that's been in my refrigerator since November, and I finally had the time. And so I've become slightly obsessed with the baking of sourdough bread.
Well, and of course, I've been following your posts about that, and this is one of the things. One of my goals for this thing was to bake bread. So I'm getting myself geared up. I think I'm going to try to start my starter this weekend, and I have the recipe from Chris Cameron, our mutual friend, and I'm excited. I mean, I think that's one of the things that it's a great time to just like those hobbies that we've been wanting to pursue.
Mhm.
We can
Well,
try them out.
it literally takes flour, water, and time.
Yes.
And I've always had flour and water, but I've rarely or really never had the time that it takes to do this, just to sort of tend to it. And I'm sure there's some beautiful metaphor and story in that. And I'm going to be thinking about that more as these weeks go on. But it takes that time to pay careful attention to it and tend to it as it's needed in order to make it work. And I have the time right now.
Yeah, it's funny. Before we started recording, we were talking about, how we're both doing during this time, and it seems like just your demeanor and everything else that you're doing really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
I mean,
yeah,
what else are you going to do, right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like this is what this is what we've been given, and it's our job now to make the most of what we've been given.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so you've already sort of shared, but that baking bread is one of the things that's working for you. But I like to ask each guest, like, what are you doing to kind of help your own well-being during this time? So besides baking bread, are there any other tips that you have for
Sure.
people?
So as you know, I'm a huge reader, and I will say one of the things I was excited about when I found out we were going to have all of this time at home was I was going to finally be able to get to the stack of books that has been growing. But I will tell you, I'll be really honest, that I've found it really hard to read right now, really hard to focus on that. And that really bothered me at first, and I was really giving myself a hard time, beating myself up about it, because it's such an important thing to me. And as I thought about that more, I realized actually what's really important to me is being curious and learning. And so I've just sort of shifted how I do that. I listen to a ton of podcasts. I have a few webinars that I've saved and that I can't watch them all the time live. And then there are actually two things that I'm really loving right now that I want to share. And they're both on Facebook. Well, one's on Facebook. The Cincinnati Zoo. So my son went to college in Ohio, and we'd been to the Cincinnati Zoo. Every day at noon Central Time, they host on Facebook Live something called home safari. And so zookeepers go into different animal habitats and interact with those animals. It's about 20 to 30 minutes. It's totally geared for school-age children, but I love everything about it. And so it's noon here in California, so I like to turn it on and watch it while I'm eating my lunch, and they have cute baby animals and all kinds of great questions and information. It's adorable. The other thing, and maybe a little bit less young kid friendly, is there's a program that's happening twice a day on YouTube called Stars in the House. And it's hosted by two men who are deeply involved in the world of live theater, especially on Broadway. And so they've been doing twice a day, 2 o'clock and 8 o'clock Eastern time, these live broadcasts with Broadway stars from their houses, and they're singing, and they have a medical correspondent that comes on and talks about the news of the day, but in terms that really are more layperson friendly. And I've enjoyed that a great deal as well.
Oh my gosh, those both sound like so much fun. You'll have to share the links so that I can check them out. There's so much right now. I feel a little bit overwhelmed by all the content. I'm actually having trouble even listening to all my regular podcasts and things because I used to listen to them as I drove places. Mm-hmm. So it's like getting into a new routine. Like I have to figure out now how to listen to podcasts. But I'm very similar to you. In fact, I shared a couple of weeks ago on a podcast episode that what's not working for me right now is focus.
Yeah.
So just anything like when I'm reading something, I usually have to reread it several times in order for it to like sink in. And I think that's just like it's just kind of to be distracted during this time is, I think, pretty normal.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that sort of would then be my biggest piece of advice or encouragement for parents out there is to cut yourself some slack. Mm-hmm. Like, be nice, be kind to yourself, recognize that these are really unusual times that we're living in, and expecting what's worked before to continue to work is maybe setting yourself up for a little bit of failure. I was really hard on myself when I couldn't use this time to read that I wanted to, and just had to realize maybe I need to be a little kinder to myself
Oh my
in
gosh.
this time. And I think that's super important. I mean, we all know parenting's hard under the best of circumstances. And I think we can all agree that these aren't necessarily the best, or at least the easiest of circumstances. So I think my biggest thing for parents right now is just cut yourself some slack.
Yeah, my kids thought I was completely going crazy yesterday because I came out into the kitchen. It was like some kind of, we have random meal times going on here. Like, I don't even know what it was, like sort of like 1 o'clock. Some of us were having breakfast. Some people were getting snacks. I don't know. But I was like doing the happy dance because I had completed my first item on my Monday's to-do list. And it was Wednesday.
And it was Wednesday.
And they were like, "What is wrong with you?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I used to be good at getting things done, and like now I'm just, I'm good at like chatting with people, and that's fine for me right now. And I've been doing puzzles and all these random things that I don't normally do. And then meanwhile, like just kind of getting through the normal stuff has been a little bit more challenging." Mm-hmm. So Maria, one of the things that I think would be helpful, and I know you're so good at this, you have really a good kind of a robust parent education program with Catalina. Like, you've realized all the things that you can share that are helpful to parents. And I think one of the realities for parents right now is really finding themselves needing to kind of create structure where there was not that need before. So like when your kids are going to school and they have all these activities and kind of the day is very dictated by kind of external stuff, you don't have to be like as on like what the details. But at camp, as you shared with me, this is the counselors need to sort of set things up. So what are your kind of like recommendations for parents who maybe are feeling like they're just kind of untethered and are just like things just don't feel like they're going well? What do you advise them to do?
It's so interesting that you asked that, because I've been thinking a lot about this lately. And this summer, as you know, we gave away copies of your book, The Beautiful Happy Campers, in yellow right there over your right shoulder. And as part of our ongoing parent education during the summer, each week we sent out information about different ones of the 9 camp secrets. And we talked a little bit about how we employ those at camp, and then how parents can maybe adapt those for home. And I was thinking in preparation for today a little bit about the situation we're in, and that for parents, it's an unusual and maybe an uncomfortable time. It's very new. It's very different. You're in a small space with people who you love very much, but a small space with no external anything to help sort of frame it. And it feels a little bit like what we ask our counselors to do, right? So we ask them to create a home with a partner and, 8, 9, or 10 kids. And so I was thinking about how we help counselors do that. And I think it could be helpful for parents right now. So the first thing we talk to counselors about is doing some real reflecting and thinking on an individual basis. Like, what's important to you as you're about to create this community in your cabin? What are the things that are really important to you? Remembering that every single thing can't be important. You really have to be able to decide what are, for lack of a better phrase, what are my core values when it comes to setting up this culture? And I think parents can do that and should do that right now as well, because it's different, and it should be different than it is in life pre being at home. And then with our counselors, we pair them up, and so when they've had this time to think individually, and then they're paired up and they spend some time with their partner, so with whoever you co-parent with, talking about, here are the things that are really important to me, what are the things that are really important to you, and then together coming up with what's really going to be important to this cabin or this family unit. And again, it's not taking the 6 things that are important to me and the 6 things that are important to you and coming up with 12 important things. It's looking at them and saying, okay, what are the 4 or 5 things that are really going to be critical? Because I think that more than ever, you and your co-parent have to be on the same page. Like, if one of you thinks it's okay for your kids to play with the neighbor kids and the other one doesn't, like, significant conflict, and who needs any more conflict right now? So,
you know what, on that note, I have to say that it is challenging, especially with older kids. Like my 16-year-old in particular. I mean, almost every day he's asking me, when can I go visit my friends? When can my friends come
Mhm.
here? When can I, because his friends are further away, and because he goes to a boarding school. But and of course, me being my personality, I'm like, oh, I hope it's really soon, and oh, I would love to have your friends here, and what would be the difference of just having one more kid? But my husband, the wise, more scientific background guy, is like, we're here, and so
Mhm.
I'm with him. I've said, I defer to Dad on this. He's in charge of our kind of our whatever we call this.
Our germ
And
circle.
yeah, I mean, he has the whole thing of, what we spray down and where packages
Mhm.
wait. And I mean, it's very, and I'm confident in that. So I think it's so important, like you said, especially now, because all those little conflicts could get bigger
Mhm.
in this time if you don't come to terms with what are we doing, like what are our rules,
Mhm.
it's and let's be on a united front, even if one of us tends to not really feel
Mhm.
as convicted on that.
Mhm. Yeah, I served on the board at our son's school for a number of years, and the man who was my immediate predecessor as the chair of the board said, in this room, we disagree, we argue, we wrestle, we make a decision, and then when we leave the room, we speak with one voice.
That is
And
wonderful. Oh
that
my
really has
gosh.
always resonated with me. Yeah, he's a very wise man. I call him Obi-Wan. He calls me young Padawan. Um,
But
anyway,
that even works for everything, for like
oh yeah.
business
Mhm.
decisions,
Absolutely.
for anything, because like so much in life is that it's not so clear cut, and you're wrestling about decisions, and it's a group thing, and you decide on something. But you're right, once it's decided, you need to be okay. We're all in this together. We're
Right.
on the
Yeah.
same
No,
page.
absolutely. You can't be undermining each other. And quite frankly, families are living kind of in these little petri dishes right now. So something that maybe wouldn't normally bother you because of the circumstances become amplified uh, in such a way that it makes it difficult to respond using your best people skills.
Right. Okay. So Maria, this is just like I think for parents who are listening, it's like everyone's kind of overwhelmed and we're giving them so much information, but it's different. For camp counselors, there's a very clear like start of a session,
Right.
start of a summer. So it's like more comfortable kind of having these chats and setting up these expectations. What's your advice for parents if they're wanting to do some form of this, but it's like starting in the middle. It's like it would be
Yeah.
like throwing two counselors into a cabin group in the middle of a session. What would
Mhm.
you say, how can you make this more palatable or easier for parents who aren't in the same setup as what counselors have during the summer?
Sure. Yeah. So I think, again, the first step is always thinking about it yourself, really taking the time. And I really believe in the power of writing things down. There's just a level of engagement and commitment when you put pen to paper or, your fingers on the keys. I'm really thinking about it yourself. And then, I mean, I think we all are at the point where we realize this isn't going to end tomorrow or anytime soon, and likely moving forward, and it's not going to be like a light switch where one day there are all of these restrictions and then the next day there are none. So I think, as families we can say, okay, it's clear that we're living in a different time, and so I think it would be a good idea for us to think about what's important in our family, what our expectations are as a family, given this new situation that I think we've all had to come to terms with accepting. So I do think that that there is sort of a natural in there. And quite honestly, like if your family is not used to having family meetings or, those sorts of kind of let's sit down and have intentional conversation around something, it might be hard. But as we like to say at Catalina Island Camps, we do hard things.
Oh, I love that. I actually think your script, I could just write down that exactly what you said. But yes, at dinner together or at some point, just say, hey, you know what, guys? We're in this time that none of us are familiar with. And so we need to start thinking a little differently about how we do things. Let's talk about it. So
Mhm.
I really like that, just making it clear the reason we need to have this conversation and set these expectations is because things are different and everybody knows things are different. So I think there is, in a way, then kind of a natural
Mhm.
ability at this point to be able to kind of pull people together and set new expectations.
Right. And I think there are a couple of things that are important about that conversation. And again, drawing from the, the time that we spend teaching counselors how to do this is at our camp on that first evening that the kids are there, they sit down as a cabin group and they talk about expectations. And I think that, and we ask them to do it very intentionally. It's not that, okay, the two of us as of counselors have decided on this list of expectations for our cabin group. No, you engage the kids and you get them involved in thinking about what do they expect from one another. And I think at this time, especially, having buy-in from your kids is critical, because if you as parents say, okay, here's what we expect, go, that's probably not going to take you very far, right? So having the kids engaged, but you and your partner know what sort of the non-negotiables are in your house, so you can guide the kids to articulating them if they don't come up with them on their own. And then if they don't come up with them on your own, you can ask questions to get them to realize where you're going, because I think once, one of the things that we require all of our counselors to do is, as they do this expectation setting, they write it down. Like, there's a big piece of poster board and it's in the cabin so that everyone can see it all of the time. So having it communicated clearly and concisely and visible, and that's something you could totally do as a family. One tip that, I've been doing this for a long time and it took a while for me to figure this out, is it's really important to drill down into some of the words when you're talking about expectations. I don't know a single cabin in 30 plus years of running camp that hasn't had respect on their list of expectations. And that's awesome, but what does respect mean, right? Like, it means different things to different people. And so really talking about what respect looks like and sounds like. What are respectful words? What are disrespectful words? What about actions? I think the same thing, I can imagine most families doing this, and the word kind or the importance of being nice coming up. Well, that's awesome, but what does that mean? And if you've got 3 kids in your house and it means 3 different things, then you're still going to have conflict, even though be kind is on your list of expectations. So really drilling down into those words and talking about what they look like and sound like, I think will be helpful for parents.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to use that with counselors too, because we do the same thing. I mean, just that conversation it's a discussion, and the kids are sharing it too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, some of the things like the expectations might be just around just basic stuff too. Like, I think in my book, I talk about just having that conversation. If your kids haven't really been helping that much with household kind of chores and stuff, I think this is another good time to say, hey, you know what? I've been doing all this stuff. This is like, things are new and different now, and I really need your help to keep the household running and functioning properly. So, here's some things that we need to get done. What's a fun way we can do them? Who is interested in what, or whatever. I did a draft for the house cleaning, and so I put all the tasks, I broke them down, and I just had some cards. They picked the cards, and then they got to pick, like, you were the number 1 draft. There were some easier things like collecting all the trash from the house, and then there was like sweeping the kitchen floor and mopping the kitchen floor and dusting and vacuuming and stuff. And it was, yeah, it's not really fun to clean, but we kind of had a little bit of fun with the draft, and then the house was, clean, and I wasn't being like the martyr doing it all myself.
Right. Oh, God, absolutely. Absolutely. And so I think the next piece of that then is just being consistent in the application of those expectations. And I think as parents, we have to hold ourselves to those same standards. If one of our expectations is using words that build other people up instead of knocking them down, if you're not doing that, be prepared for your kids to call you out on it, because it happens with counselors. A kid will be happy to say, like, you're not following, what we said we were going to follow. And that's okay. Perfection's not the goal here. Just really being consistent and not letting things slide. And then I think the last piece of that we talk to counselors about is knowing when to ask for help. I think sometimes we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as parents to be perfect. And one of the things that I love so much about Tina Bryson's new book is just this idea that it's not about being perfect, it's about being present. And I love that, because I can be present. I cannot be perfect, but I can 100% be present. Like that is an accomplishable goal for me. So I appreciate that permission.
Oh my gosh, so true. You know what? I picked as my one word for this year, presence. And I mean, it
Mm.
is so like I'm so glad I picked it was meant to be. But I noticed that, with having these kids home that aren't who aren't normally home, what I've found is that if they stop by, because my office is actually there's no door on my office at the moment because I've relocated due to other people needing my former
Mm.
office. But when people stop by to chat, I just kind of drop everything and just chat. I mean, I just realized that like this time, this too shall pass, and I'm not going to be productive as I normally am and whatever. But really, what matters is just being present for the few people who I'm here with. Just I'm going to try to be there for them as much as I
Well,
can.
and I would argue that you are being productive. It's just a different kind of productive.
True. Yep.
You
Yep.
know, and,
Yep.
and so I think sort of reframing it.
Yep.
I've been thinking a lot about, because expectations are such a big thing at our camp. I could see how some parents might be thinking about lowering their expectations, and I don't really like to think about it as lowering. It's more like pivoting your expectations,
Mhm.
because your circumstances are different. So your
Yes.
expectations still need to be in alignment with your values as a family. They're just going to be lived out a little bit differently now than they were before. And I would also say, this is a great time to teach kids those skills and to give them experiences in things that we're always hearing young adults aren't prepared for. How great if your kids can say, during this time of quarantine, I learned how to make all of our family's favorite recipes, or I learned how to change a tire, or check the oil, or plant and tend a garden, balance a checkbook, open up a credit card, all of those things that we're often hearing young adults and the folks who work with young adults complain about, as gaps in their knowledge. This is a great time. You might not feel very comfortable teaching your kids algebra or geometry, but you can probably teach them how to balance a checkbook.
Yeah. Or make sourdough bread.
Yeah, there you go. It's the greatest science
I
experiment
agree. And I
ever.
like that you explained that it's not this expectations. Like I think in general, like maybe when we're not during this time, expectations might be things about like screen time and,
Mhm.
these very specific things. I think what I'm getting from this is you may have different expectations about that stuff. Maybe there's going to be a lot more screen time right now, but we're going to build each other up and like share something we appreciate about each other each
Mhm.
day, or we're going to something we're going to live into some values of kindness or respect in a new way, because we have so much more time together that we need to be thinking about this stuff more.
Yeah.
So I really really like that. Okay, in our last few minutes, Maria, you had some great other resources and ideas
Yeah.
for activities. If you could just share those, and then we'll of course put links for people.
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about another thing that I love, which is reverse engineering. So starting with sort of that end in mind, and sort of the picture that I had in my head. I mean, obviously, I don't have a child at home right now, so it's just a picture. Is if I were sitting around the table 15 years from now with my kids and my spouse, and maybe one of those kids had brought someone special home. Maybe it's somebody who's going to end up joining our family, whatever. And so you're sitting around the table, you're having this conversation, and it comes around to this time, right? This time of being at home. What do you want your kids to say? And not your kids tomorrow or even a year from now, but 15 years from now, 20 years from now, when you're reflecting back on this time with your family, what do you hope your kids remember about that time? And, do you want them to remember that mom was kind of a crazy lunatic? Or do you want them to remember that, hey, that's when I learned how to make all of grandma's Thanksgiving recipes, or that's when I learned how to play Scrabble really well, because we played hours and hours of Scrabble. Like, how do you want them to feel? So a couple of things that I've found that I think might help with that a little bit, or I don't know, maybe not. One is something my sister sent me. It's a COVID-19 time capsule, which we'll link. It's like I don't know, a 10, 12, maybe 15 page kid-focused workbook almost, that they're like guided questions that you can answer and places to draw certain kinds of pictures that you can then
Hold on just a second.
sure.
I'm still in the middle of an interview. Can you set up? We can use mine, but just get like, I guess, wherever we're sitting. Yes, I'll bring the computer. Sorry, we got a text because the birthday lunch starts in not in
Yes.
11 minutes.
So anyway, you could take this time capsule, fill it out with all of your kids, and just put it away. And so if you ever are having that conversation 15 years from now, you could maybe pull it out. I mean, if we think about it, this is the kind of thing that people are going to be asked about. You know, our kids are going to be asked about 50 years from now when they're grandparents, and their grandchildren are writing reports about the the pandemic of 2020. To be able to pull something like this out, I think would be really cool. And
that actually reminds me, I just have to tell you, Maria, so the Jeannie Veazey, who was one of the founders of her camp, I remember her talking often about the Spanish flu in I think 17 or 18, because she lost two of her sisters, sisters. But so it's just so interesting that like this for our kids and for us is like that was for that generation, or all these other events that have happened. But yes, I like the idea of doing some kind of recording of it, because it is a historic event, a negative historic event, but still a historic event.
Yeah, I have a couple of older friends who we've been talking about this, and they've been reflecting a lot back on polio and what they remember from when polio was a really big thing. Anyway, and the other thing, this is I got from a friend, and I think it's just genius. I have a friend who works at the Shoah Foundation at USC collecting oral histories from Holocaust and other trauma survivors. And just really talking about how this is a phenomenal time for your kids to use Zoom and the recording option on Zoom to collect oral histories from their grandparents and other older family members. And so this friend of mine created some materials, sort of an easy how to collect oral histories. She called it, So You Want to Interview Grandma, I think is the name of the PowerPoint that she put together. And then with another colleague of hers who does oral history collection, they created a list of questions that your kids could then schedule meetings, schedule times to talk to your parents and aunts and uncles about all sorts of things that then are the beginning of a family history. And I think what I love about that is it's a big project that has multiple steps that allows kids to really engage, and it allows them to interact and connect with their grandparents and other relatives. I just think it's a beautiful, beautiful idea.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I want to do it with like my father-in-law and stuff. But anyway, so yeah, really great ideas. Maria, this has been so terrific. We're going to have to do another one. We'll do it again.
Absolutely.
Because I have a feeling we might still be here in a couple of weeks, so
I know,
we can just talk again. But thanks for all your sharing, and go ahead and email me all the links and everything, and I'll add them when I upload this.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Audrey.
Okay, talk to you later.
Talk
Bye.
to you soon.